Welcome to Career and Leadership Real Talk, the no-nonsense guide for ambitious managers who want to have more impact and progress their career. I'm Pamela Langan, a job search coach and expert CV writer specialising in helping frustrated professionals land the jobs and pay rises they know they deserve.
And I'm Jackie Jagger, a leadership and mindset coach specialising in helping newly promoted and new to role leaders to avoid the dickhead trap and lead with confidence. Between us, we've helped hundreds of leaders and managers to find new roles, take ownership of their careers, and handle the challenges that job searches and leadership responsibility inevitably bring. And now we're joining forces to share with you what we know has worked for our clients.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode. Today, we are talking about 5 approaches you can take when you're lacking confidence in your leadership. Because we all know there's times in our careers when we're lacking confidence and it can really make us feel like we're failing. But most of the time, it's actually when we're starting to grow, when we're being stretched, or when we're facing something new. When you don't feel confident, it can really affect how you show up, how you make decisions, and how much influence you have. So in this episode, we're going to unpack it all and we're going to share 5 approaches that you can use when your confidence is low so that you can keep leading well, even when you don't feel 100% sure of yourself. So we're going to kick off with leading from intention and not insecurity. Jackie, tell us what we can do when our confidence dips and we really start second guessing everything that we're doing.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, this, because I think what we probably have to really acknowledge is that this is normal. People's confidence will ebb and flow, and it is very easy to not be 100% convinced about how well you are or aren't leading. And when that happens, what other people see and experience of you is often the insecurity that you're feeling. And that can come in a whole range of ways. So you can start second guessing things. You might be slower to make decisions. You might check in on things that you wouldn't check in on if you were feeling more confident. And the other thing is that you can try and overcompensate for feeling insecure by trying to prove yourself. So by taking on more, saying yes to things, not being willing to push back or challenge on things that you would otherwise push back or challenge on. So I think in terms of what we're saying here, lead from intention and not insecurity, it's about recognizing what that insecurity can prompt you to do and recognizing those signs of when that comes up. And instead, it's then creating that pause. And we talk, don't we, every week it feels about the power of reflection and the power of pausing. But it's creating that moment where your behaviors are not in line with who you are when you're at your best, recognizing that and creating the pause. And in terms of leading from intention, what we would say is ask yourself that question of, what kind of leader do I want to be? How would that kind of leader, if they were feeling confident, what would they be doing? So this is absolutely not saying fake it till you make it. That is advice that massively grinds my gears, because that's just a recipe for making yourself into more of a fraud, making yourself into that person who is trying to be what they think they're supposed to be rather than who you really are. So this isn't about that. This is about asking yourself that question of, if I was feeling at my best, what would other people experience of me? What would I be doing? And how can I choose to behave more in line with that rather than behaving in line with the insecurities that are maybe bubbling under the surface?
Yeah, that is a really good point. And I think it is one of those moments, isn't it, where you go, I am feeling something. What is this that I'm feeling? And usually when you're in that situation, you're feeling some kind of fear, you're feeling worried, you might be feeling stressed. And it's almost stopping, isn't it? Like you saying, taking that pause and going, what am I feeling? Where is this coming from? And then asking yourself those questions, because forcing yourself down that road will make sure that you actually do something about it. And it's surprising, isn't it? Like when you do that and you go, hold on, I am feeling in this way. And then you start questioning yourself. how you can turn that around pretty quickly. And you might not still feel 100% confident, but you can go, hold on a minute, I've been here before, or this is new. How am I going to deal with it? Do I need to deal with it now, or can I come back to it later? And like you say, just taking that pause to figure it out, I think is super important, isn't it?
Yeah. And I remember years ago, it was actually my first manager role. And I remember having in the early days of that role, this like literally this constant mantra. And I can still see the space in the building where I used to go when I needed that pause. And I used to ask myself, what would a successful experienced manager do in this situation? And just let my brain answer that question. And then I was like, okay, so I do know what I need to do. Now I need to do that. And it was things like difficult conversations, performance management conversations, and that kind of thing, where I was new, I was inexperienced, and all of that was new to me. So, like you were saying, it's that lack of confidence is so often a sign of growth. And I was doing these things for the first time. So it wasn't fair to expect myself to be able to do them brilliantly. But by asking myself that question, it was literally on repeat for probably the first 6 months of the time in that role. But it was so helpful. It was really helpful to ask myself because it proved to me that I had an idea of what I needed to do. It just felt like it was a stretch. It was uncomfortable. I wasn't fully skilled in it yet, but I had a good idea of what the answer to that question was or normally did. And if I didn't, then that's a case of, right, okay, I can ask someone else that question. I can find a successful, experienced manager and I can ask them, what should I do in this situation? So I think when you ask yourself that question, you often find that you know what you need to do, but it just feels uncomfortable. And sometimes you find that you don't know what you need to do, but then it points to how can I find that information and gain the confidence that I at least know what I'm supposed to be doing here.
Yeah. And I think when you do that on a regular basis, you create a habit, don't you? And when you make it a habit to stop and question yourself, that's where you're going to grow, isn't it? And that's where you'll start rebuilding your confidence or building on the confidence that you've already got. So I absolutely love that. So the second thing then that we were looking at was around focusing on the strengths that you can still access. So when you're in those situations and you're thinking, oh my goodness, maybe everything feels like it's fallen down around you. Maybe it's a really comfortable or an awkward situation. It could even be like a presentation. There's so many different situations that you could find yourself in where your confidence takes a knock. How can you, when you're in this situation, how can you focus on those strengths that you can still access?
So this is an interesting one again, because I think the first stage with this is actually knowing what your strengths are. And that might be that you are a really clear communicator. It might be that you have compassion and empathy for your team. It might be that you are a calming influence, or that you do present well in front of the senior leadership team. But I think it's reminding yourself of what your strengths are and what your talents are. And then the question that I would say to ask yourself is, how can I use those things that I know are strengths during the course of this week? Because when you are constantly batting up against things that add to your insecurity or add to creating a confidence dip, then that can be a vicious cycle. Whereas when you are operating from those strengths and looking for ways that you can bring those strengths into play, that gives you a bit of pep, it gives you an up within the week. So if that you are confident and calm in your communication style, then look at where are the opportunities this week where I'm going to be communicating with people, and how can I make sure that I use that strength to its best effect in that situation. And it does two things. It reminds you to lean into your strengths, but it also reminds you to notice the good stuff during the course of that week or that month or even that day on a shorter term. And that can really help to break that vicious cycle where you're focusing on what you lack or what you feel is missing, and notice that actually there is some balance, and be intentional about noticing the positive stuff that you are using in your day to day.
Yeah, and I suppose that fits in nicely with the third thing that we were thinking about, in that how you prepare for these things is super important, isn't it? So thinking about preparing, but not trying to be perfect, I think that's key, isn't it? So it's thinking about what might come up and which strengths that you can then lean into, but then also being open-minded that there might be some curveballs that come along too.
Yeah. And I know that this is something that you're really good at. So not long ago, we had a conversation where we were having a business meeting and you were asking questions. And I was like, oh, you're preparing really well for this. And you were like, yep, I'm back in corporate mode. Never go into a meeting without preparation. And I think when you're feeling like you're lacking in confidence, it's very easy to just be blown with the wind and go into each and every situation on the back foot. So this is absolutely not about being a perfectionist and feeling like you've got to spend 4 hours prepping for a 1 hour meeting, but it is about asking yourself the question of what situations am I going into? What information might I want to draw on? How might I want to consider how I want to come across in that? Being clear on what message do I want to give in that conversation or in that discussion, anticipating where some of the challenges or obstacles might be so that you can draw on that data or on how you want to show up. And when you do that in advance, then it allows you to approach the situation with that little bit more confidence, as opposed to everything feeling like a curveball.
Yeah, and I think it really helps your brain function as well, because if you've thought ahead, some of those key important things that you need to think about, they're already at the front of your head, or they're already at the front of your mind. And what you can do then is you can call on those rather than your brain having to go away and find the answers and dig around. It's easier to then go, okay, I've already given that some thought. I wasn't expecting it to come from that angle, but I've already got a little bit to go on, so I can run with that. And I think the more that you prepare for anything, the easier it's going to be. But I think sometimes as well, we get bogged down, don't we, in the day to day. So preparation takes that back seat. Whereas even if you just do 10 minutes preparation on something, you're going to give yourself that better head start. And when you go into a situation where you're lacking confidence, you're always going to have the adrenaline boost and the cortisol and all of the good things that go on in our bodies when we're under pressure and stress. That will stop our brains from working as effectively as they are. So the more preparation that we've done, or even if we've done a little bit, it's going to help that thinking process and help us to be more calm, I think, in the moment as well.
It does, because what it does is it's mental rehearsal. When you are preparing, you're thinking about what might I face in this situation? What might I need to do? If this happens, what would I do then if that happens? And you do it all the time with clients with interview prep. If you're going into a situation and you're anticipating what might be demanded of me in that situation, then you give your brain the chance to mentally rehearse some of those different options. And that means that then in the moment, if those things do happen, your brain doesn't have to panic because it's already got, okay, tick, that has happened. So this is what I was going to do if that happened. So let me go down there. So it allows your brain to stay in that calmer, more logical, rational space because you're not facing something that's unexpected and that you haven't mentally rehearsed. You're facing something that you are already mentally got a strategy for. If that happens, then this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah, and I suppose that fits in nicely with the fourth thing, which is being honest without undermining yourself. Because if you've got that sense of calm and clarity going on, then you can be honest without undermining yourself. And even if you're feeling a little bit vulnerable in that situation, you can go, it's okay. I've already given it some thought and I've already thought about the strengths that I'm going to lean into and all the rest of it. So it's almost like you're calming down all of those thoughts and feelings that are going on. And that can really help as well, can't it?
Yeah. And I do think there is a real balance to be struck here in terms of that honesty. And that's why we said without undermining yourself, because if you try to seem invulnerable and that you've got all the answers and that you've got everything together, and that is not the reality of how you feel, then that's gonna leak out. People are going to be able to tell that something isn't quite gelling, and they won't have that confidence in you when you're trying to project a mask. But by the same token, so I think it's really important to be honest about, I don't have answers to that yet. that's something that we need to give greater thought to. There's lots of ways of being able to be honest about what you do and don't know, or how ready or prepared you are for a situation. But if what you're doing is going, well, honestly, I don't have a clue. No one's told me anything, so I can't tell you anything. That's when you're undermining yourself, because what you're doing there is just saying, oh, throwing myself out of this situation, I may as well not be here. And I think it's that balance that's really important, to be honest and to role model the fact that you don't have to have all the answers all the time. It's not a realistic expectation to have all the answers all the time, without just throwing it out there of, I just don't have a clue.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point as well, because sometimes it's okay to say, look, I don't think we've got all the key information that we need to make a decision. And it's not about you saying, I haven't got a clue because I don't know what's going on, which we've probably all been in a situation like that, where we're sat in a meeting and we're thinking, oh my goodness, what is going on? Why haven't I been told this? How's all this been happening? And I'm not aware of it. And I think it's just at that point where you go, okay, I'm going to take control of this. And yeah, I might not have the information, but it's okay then to point out, I think we've got some information missing. How can we get that information? Who are going to be the best people to bring that information to us? Or is there anybody in the room that can give us any insight? And I think by doing that, you almost like you're taking ownership without undermining yourself. And you're also getting that information that you're missing as well.
And you're pointing towards the solution rather than being driven just by that lack of confidence and feeling out of kilter in that moment. And I remember a friend of mine talking about when they had a new CEO that did a town hall and stood up and essentially said, I've never done this level of role before, so I'm going to be winging it. And it's like she was sat there with her head in her hands listening to this CEO talking, because it might have been honest, but it didn't inspire confidence in those around. Whereas the approach that you're describing is focused towards the solution. It's focused towards mobilizing people to gather what information is missing, how do we fill those gaps, what needs to go here. So that is where that leadership quality comes in. And I think it's just really, and we've all done it. We've all been that person at some point who's so frustrated and irritated that nobody's communicated anything to me and I don't have the information and they didn't tell me the information. But to verbalize or articulate that in that way is not doing right by yourself and how you want to be perceived as a leader. So it's about balancing those things of not being dishonest and claiming that you've got information that you haven't, but also not just throwing your toys out the pram or kind of just saying, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, and I think sometimes as well, like the embarrassment or the shame of not having all the answers can really affect people and cause people to act in ways that maybe they wouldn't usually act. So I think it's okay. You can take any ego out of the situation and just be like, okay, what do we need? What's missing? Let's move forward. And I think as long as you're always focused on that moving forward and how do we keep everyone calm and moving forward, then that also has a calming effect on you. And another thing, which is going to be the final thing, is around borrowing that belief when you need to, because I think sometimes we will go through phases where we think, wow, I'm so out of my depth, or you've got something that's going on that is causing you to be lacking that real self-belief. And sometimes it's a downward spiral, because once you get into that and then you go into everything with that, it gets worse and worse, because it feels like it's being confirmed everywhere you look. You're not good at something, or you need to be better at something. So I suppose with self-belief, we've got to build it over time. But in the short term, is it okay to borrow some?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember Paula Brockwell, who was a guest on the podcast at, I think, back end of last year. I remember hearing her speak. And one of the things that she was talking about was learn to see yourself through the lens of someone who loves you. And it was that sense that we are often our own greatest critics. And I think no more so than when you're struggling for confidence. You almost judge yourself and jump in and beat yourself up about things before other people get the chance. So this is about reversing that and saying, okay, who else is there who believes in me? What would they say to me? What would someone who believes in you say about how you're showing up at the moment? What would they tell you about how capable you are of handling challenges and bouncing back from a confidence dip? And I think when you ask yourself those questions, and potentially in an ideal world, also ask other people those questions. If you've got a mentor or a trusted colleague or a friend outside of work, just ask for that support to say, what do you see that I'm good at? What are the things that you think are my best qualities? Ask those questions to get some reassurance and some reminders of maybe those strengths so that you can access them, of the qualities that you've got that allow you to continue to grow and develop. And borrow away with that belief. Borrow from all the people who believe in you, because they're probably right. When you're in a spiral, you're focused on the negative, they're in a more realistic place because they're not caught in that emotional whirlwind. So actually, it's much more likely that their answers are logical and rational and true than it is what your mind monkey chatter is telling you in that moment.
Yeah, that's just so powerful, isn't it? And I absolutely love that when Paula talked through that, because in those different situations, you can just take that pause and get. I always use like my granddad as my person. What would he say about me and my ability in this situation? And it's always going to be positive. So it's always a good reminder and a good place to take that pause. So I'd recommend that everyone find that person that they can then see themselves through their eyes. Moving on to the quick wins from this episode then. So we've talked through loads of stuff, haven't we? But we've started doing our little quick win segment at the end just so that we can give everybody a little bit of a roundup and a few things to take away. So what would you say the quick wins are from today?
So our quick wins from today would be, one is just choose one strength to lean into this week. So just get clear on one thing that you already do well, remind yourself of it, and ask yourself the question of how can I use that strength this week? The second is to set a clear intention before your next meeting. So before, whether that be a one-to-one, whether that be a team meeting, whether that be a cross-functional project meeting, before you go in, just ask yourself, how do I want to show up? And then what will I do in order to show up that way? So that you're going in intentional about how you want others to perceive you. And then the third is to speak up, because when confidence dips, people often shrink back and contribute less. And if you're doing that because you're not sure that you know the right answers, or you're not sure about how you're going to articulate it, you will not solve that problem by continuing to stay quiet. So having identified your strength and having set that clear intention, then do be willing to speak up. Even if you don't articulate it perfectly, even if you're not lauded by everybody for your contribution immediately, be prepared to speak up and judge yourself for how willing were you to speak up, rather than feeling like you have to have all the right answers to give yourself permission to speak.
Yeah, I think they're brilliant tips there for people to take away. Amazing. If you're in a new role, or you're stretching yourself, or dealing with pressure that's really shaking your confidence, then coaching could help. And we work with lots of different people to build strategies to help you lead with clarity and presence, even when you don't feel at your best. So if you'd like to explore coaching, drop us a message and we'll be able to share the options with you. And as usual, don't forget to rate and review us on your favourite podcast platforms, and share this episode with anybody that you think might find it useful. And we'll be back next week with another episode.
Exciting news from us. If you're an ambitious leader or manager earning 50k or more and you're ready to take your career to the next level, we have an opportunity for you. Introducing Catalyst Career Club, your secret weapon for unlocking career success. As a member, you'll get access to monthly live training sessions, exclusive job opportunities, and
and the ability to get personalised advice from us on your toughest career challenges.
We've helped thousands of driven leaders like you secure significant pay rises, land dream roles, and thrive in their careers. And now we want to support you in achieving your most ambitious career goals too. Membership is just $6.99 per month with no contract or tie-in. And as a special bonus for being our podcast listeners, you can use the code podcast at checkout to get your first month for just £1. Head over to pamelalangan.com/Catalyst Career Club to sign up now, and we'll see you inside.